Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy for Nerds by Nerds. I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and today I'm joined by this nerd.
Nerder Doug.
What's up, my man? How's it going tonight?
Yeah, so. It's going.
Just another day in the apocalypse.
Yes,
And tonight we're talking about time.
which
Therefore,
is
therefore
easy.
that made me think of chronomancy,
Okay.
chronomancers.
Yeah,
So
that is a long.
apparently,
It's a long time thing that people seem to want.
well, yeah, I mean TSR launched the first chronomancer product back in 1995.
Okay.
And
Did you look it up, or do you remember like what sorts of things it could do?
I have no idea. Timey stuff, all those weird time spells.
Yeah, it's a lot easier in a game, especially. I would think than even more so than like any other kind of story, like a movie or TV show, to go forward in time, because
Yeah.
it's like, well, there's a lot more than just narrative things happening when you go back in time. Although I guess it's akin to being like a set director, like the continuity people on like a TV show, where it's like, well, if that cup was there, and similar in the sense of like
Yeah.
you, more than just the story to roll back and taking back like damage you took or actions and that were based on other people doing things are difficult.
So that definitely was a thing. I think we probably would have put the kibosh on in our games back in the day.
Going back in time.
No, no, no. Just like the chronomancer and
Oh,
time magic. I just imagine us being like, no, I don't think so.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what I would have done. Probably would have when somebody back then or now wanted to play around. I was like, oh, I got this thing I saw. Try it. Probably wouldn't mind, but see how it goes. I really don't remember what they did, but I mean, at the other end of it could just manifest as like haste and slow and things like that just speed up like localized time control.
Yeah.
Although when you get high level, you want to be doing a lot more than that, I'm
Time
sure.
stop.
Yeah, which has gotten a lot weaker over the editions, as I recall, right? I mean,
Yeah. You say weaker. I say less broken. So,
well, yeah, I mean, it's gotten less potent,
yeah.
right? Like, what does it
Although,
do now? I used it in a Scarlet Sisterhood.
yeah,
Um,
it's still really good. It's just you
oh,
can't
sure,
affect
sure.
others with it. You can do like if you want to be like, hey, I want 8 rounds to buff my party. I think that's along the lines of what you can do with it now.
Hmm. Yeah, there's more restrictions. I mean, it used to be like you could, lay down like several delayed blast fireballs and or whatever.
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
that was totally
that was just the tip of the iceberg.
what it was getting used for back then. It's like I'm going to use every offensive spell I have right now,
Yeah,
and this
yeah,
thing is
right.
just going to die.
Yeah, but
Uh,
I mean, at the other, to be fair, it's like, well, when you're super high level like that and wielding the most powerful magic in the game, you know, it's
so you get 2 to 5 rounds,
uh-huh.
which you can do stuff.
What is it, like 1d4 plus one?
It is, it is.
Okay, but what can't you do?
Let's see. Briefly stop the flow of time for everyone but yourself. No time passes for other creatures while you take 1 die 4 plus turns in a row, during which you can use actions and move as normal. The spell ends if one of those actions used during that period or any effects that you create during this period affects a creature
Mm.
other than you or an object being worn or carried by someone other than you. In addition, spell ends if you move to a place more than 1,000 feet from the location where you cast it.
So yeah, I guess because you're doing it in rounds, you couldn't do like fireballs because it would affect somebody that round. It's not like
Yeah.
it would all go off.
Although
Huh,
I
you know
don't,
what I'm saying?
I don't know if you have wiggle room with a delayed fireball or
I
not.
was literally, I was like, does it delay? Or is it because it used to actually be like the next turn it went off, right? Or
I
like
think you can pick. Like,
yeah.
it's
Oh yeah, okay. It is when the spell ends, which is
yeah,
1 minute, because your concentration broken or decide to end it. So you could delay blast fireball.
or it can't.
It's oh yeah, well, you could do one of them, and then the next thing you did. Like it's a concentration spell, so
Yeah, so you couldn't like
you couldn't do two of them.
the tough thing is you couldn't layer a bunch of concentration spells.
Right.
You could
But
do
you could do a delayed
one.
blast fireball and like a regular fireball or any other pretty much damaging spell in those two. Like Meteor Swarm, although that's an 9-pulse spell too, so you could do two.
Well,
but whatever.
Yeah, but if you damage them with Meteor Swarm, I mean, I guess like you
Well,
could.
I'm saying you could delay the fireball until the next round. So then when you cast Meteor Swarm like that and the delayed blast fireball.
Yeah.
But then the time stop would stop.
Well, time stop is instantaneous too. So, but I mean, like, yeah, like if you layered it the right way, can a wizard?
Right.
Does wizards get Glyph of Warding?
Yeah, how long does that take? I think I smell a video emerging from this conversation.
Maybe you never know. Well, Glyph of Warding is an hour to cast, so afraid not. We used to abuse the Glyph of Warding spell so badly in our games.
Yeah,
that used to be a favorite for us. Glyph of Warding on coins for caltrops. Glyph of Warding on warhammers to attack people with.
You get a Glyph of Warding. You get a Glyph of Warding.
Yeah.
Gets a Glyph of Warding. Well, that's kind of what the Rune Knight is in some sense. Now they can put your mark on things.
Yeah. No, that makes some sense. You get to do things with the glyphs. And also, like, the magic item glyphs have some cool things as well.
Mm-hmm.
That they introduced with, what was that? Storm King's Thunder? Sky King's Thunder?
Storm King's Thunder, yeah, those were like runes that did stuff, or you could put them on a thing and they do different things.
Yeah, it changes the magic item essentially.
I looked that up. One of my potential characters for Ted's game was like Rooney McRune, Rune Master. I was like, how many? And I was like, oh, there's deep magic rune, magic, and I was like, how many runes can this person get with all the magic items? And I was just sort of like theory crafting, and it was a lot of runes. Spoiler alert. I mean, because that rune magic, it's like feat based, and every time you take, and you can get it multiple times. Every time you take it, you can get like 2 runes. And so I was like, well, if it's a Rune Knight fighter, you can get a lot of feats because they're fighters. Plus you're a Rune Knight. And then I was like, and then just for shiggles, I was like, went into Storm King's Thunder. And I was like, what if you had all these runes too? It's like you'd have so many runes you wouldn't even know what to do with. I mean, it would be ridiculous. Like,
so, kind of like circling back to the topic of time.
Sure.
So one of the ways I like to use it and play with time in my games sometimes is like flashbacks.
I've always wanted to do that. Somebody submitted like a volunteer article years ago about doing that. Like if somebody was couldn't make it, like doing a flashback with the characters that were there or something.
Oh, okay. Well, I've used it more of as a tool, like a narrative tool for the players, to kind of like get something about their characters or something that's coming up in the game, and like kind of explain it through that. I feel like it works best if you kind of give the players like a heads up, like if you want to do something like that, so they can have some time to think about it instead of like putting them on the spot.
That could be fun too, though.
That could be fun too. It all depends on your players, right, and how comfortable they are with that.
Like if we sat down on Tuesday night and like one of us was like, okay, like, we're going to go back in time to blah, blah, blah. I think we'd all be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Go for it. But sorry.
Nah, that's fine. Like, well, also, I guess we recently used it in kind of like the Moon Rising game, right? So kind of
yeah, very effectively too. That was such a fun game, man. Thanks.
To kind of like explain some things that happened that none of the players, well, you would have been there kind of for it, but
your
character
as a player,
didn't
remember. I didn't know that. That was so much fun. I love that stuff.
No, as a player, you didn't know it. So it can be like a cool way to introduce things in the game. And we're doing a lot of it in our Curse of Strahd game, right? Where I guess on the DM's Guild, there's like a supplement with the book that you find. And it kind of like, I believe the way it's written is like, it's like a way for you to vomit things on your players from the history of Barovia and Strahd. But the way it works, but the way it works in that game is we get sucked into the book and we kind of like experience these events that happened in the past, and like in minor ways we're able to interact with them and have things happen, you know. And even if they are set in stone, kind of doesn't feel like it because the way we play through it.
Sure.
But yeah, between like well, I can't say for sure, but it's being implemented very well. And I'm guessing because Elhanu's using it, he's enjoying it. He really, likes how it was written. But he's
and you all seem like you're on board too.
Yeah. And he's executing it very well. So that's kind of an instance where you're using like this kind of like almost like time travel to go back and see what happened and experience it and make it more interactive.
Oh yeah. Then you feel like you're part of the story.
Yeah.
Like, because it's like
we're pretty sure we made Strahd at this point. So
yeah, right. Well, that's cool. That, and it's because of that technique. I think in the adventure as written, it's just like a plot ticket basically. Like it doesn't, it's just like you have to get the thing to go to the place to get the thing to go to the place to beat Strahd.
Yeah, that's exactly.
So that's neat to like give it more context and interact with it like that. It seems cool.
Yeah, it also makes the game kind of last longer because like every couple sessions we're like, oh, let's go back in the book and see what happens, see what we can learn, see what we can do.
And again, like it's a long published campaign, so it's like, well, if you played it as the book, it'd just be like a lot of slogging through dungeon crypts and places to get those things.
Yeah.
Which is fun if you play for like 6 or 7 hours every week, but you're like 2 or 3 hours, like you guys would still be like in the town of Barovia.
Yeah. We finally had our first encounter where we felt competent. We went to the hags at the millstone.
Oh, and we just grinder.
And it was just like none of us took any damage. We just like
that
totally housed that account. Oh yeah.
Chris Hausnick has a great comment that reminds me of my own game. Say, I used time when my party traveled the plains. They were gone 1 day from their perspective, but I had them roll a d6 to see how many days they were really gone from the prime material plane. And my game, which has greatly affected sort of like my view of my little homebrew teeny area that, that I sort of build on over time. First time I ran a game there, the players wound up in the like I call it the dreaming world, the Feywild, like really early on. They were like 3rd or 4th level.
Yeah.
And there's some chart, I think it's in the DMG, and it's like you roll to see how time affects you in the waking world when you're there. And they had like the rarest one where it was like every day that passes for them was like a month or something.
Yeah.
And the real world. And then like the day after the first day they were there, like when you wake up, there's another table and it's like just to have random effects. And it was they rolled that they forgot everything that happened the day before, so they didn't know why they were there anymore.
Oh no,
they were from the waking world, so they didn't have any concern about getting back, and they just stayed there. So like all those games, like when we started our Tuesday night group offline, when you guys were playing, like they were, that was during that time, so it was just like fun to play with the time because they never came back. The campaign fizzled, but so in canon they're still there.
There's a couple of questions I want to get to real quick, and then we'll go back to talking about time in general.
Yeah.
Double underscore, is the sorcerer the ultimate time manipulator? Quicken spell, extend spell, slow, haste, to name a few. Also, twin, when you combine twin with some of those effects, like haste.
Maybe even the clockwork soul could be thematically like that too. I mean, you're like, like the time gem.
Yeah.
Like, to make your effects.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, I do too.
I also want to play that one. I just haven't gotten around to it. Taurus, for DMing new players, would you rather teach them the rules all in session 0 or teach the rules when you come across them in game? I never ran session 0 for new players. I'm leaning towards teaching them when we come across them. There's too many rules to teach them all the rules at once. Like, if you want to make sure they never come back for session one, do that. And
I like to, if they're new players that have never played, I like walking people through the character creation process
yeah,
because I like to do more like try to get them to think like, well, who is this person now? Like, well, this score makes this hit harder and stuff like that. You know, just like, well, just make what you think seems cool with the background and all that,
for new
and then
players,
just tell them basically like you always say when you want to learn a new game, it's like, well, just tell me what you want to do or what you imagine. We'll figure out how to make that.
yeah, I'd say for new players, where the session zero is just going to be character creation, and then like have them kind of come up with like why they're together, how they know each other.
Yeah.
Do they have a home base? What is that like? What does that look like? Where is it? Who do they who do they regularly encounter? Near that home base. Let them give you some of the NPCs, do the groundwork. Collaboratively tell a little bit of story about
Mm-hmm.
the kind of like the bases where your game is going to start, and that'll help
Yeah.
them get vested in it. Like we did a session zero for Ted's one game. After I think it was his first game after we did the level 20 game, and we did a session zero, and most of that was like what was our early adventures, how we came together. Like we kind of like um build out the villain for that game because of that. I mean, obviously we started at a higher level, so you know, you had to explain your other levels anyway, um, and how everyone kind of came to be together. Obviously, for players that haven't played again, starting at level one is going to make it a lot more easier for them to kind of grasp and learn the rules. They don't have a lot of abilities to pick and choose from starting out, which is it was kind of better because then when you like Doug says, like you just go, hey, what do you want to do, and then have them explain what they want to do, and then we can like figure out as the GM, you just figure out what they need to roll, what what that's what that entails. Like you could kind of do it as like a little tutorial, like why when they say something like I want to run at them and hit them with a flying headlock, and you're just like, okay, well, let's make an athletics check because that's what we use, right? And
Mm-hmm.
oh, you beat them by a lot. What were you trying to make happen? And then like you can narratively like, okay, you got them grappled and on the ground or whatever.
That's a big responsibility. I feel like too, like introducing somebody to the game,
Yeah,
because it's like, well, that's going to shape their perception of what playing a game is. So it helps if you know them, but at the same time, you can kind of like help mold their perception. If you're aware of that, like you can help lay the foundation for the kind of experience you want too. So like, let's say you want to encourage like role playing amongst the players, which I just wrote a post about the other day. Um, like I like to ask people questions about the other characters, after they've made them. But so
mm,
like you're like, oh, what's tell me about something you did once to like raise their spirits during like a just a traveling in like a rainy slog day, just things like that to get them to already think of like talking to each other. But
mm-hmm.
also you can do a lot of like world building and kind of like establish the kind of setting and game they're going to be too. When you're going over the options of their character classes, you see like, oh, do you want to be a barbarian? And that's your chance to like, here's how barbarians are in my world. It's like if they're the standard default, like they live in the sort of off the land and removed from civilization, but maybe they're wildly different in your game. So you can kind of like get them in that mindset too and see what they think sounds cool to play.
Yeah, I mean, definitely can do things like that, and like what choices they make as a character. Like the character's playing a ranger, and but they already know they want to be a beastmaster ranger, and they're a halfling or a gnome because
Yeah.
they're dying to have a wolf that they can ride,
Yeah, if
right?
they never played D&D before, they don't care what the best,
Yeah,
DPS is or whatever. That is no, it's like not even
and
a thought that would cross their mind.
then you can kind of throw it back to them, and be like, "Oh, where you're from? Do all the halflings ride wolves?"
Right.
And give them, kind of give them some agency in the world to build things out a little bit.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, because
there's
like you said earlier too, it's just like there's tons of rules, and at the same time, there's tons of things for which there are no rules. So
yeah, and then
you
there's
know,
exceptions to those rules that we already know, right?
yeah.
So you know, as they kind of go along, right? It's kind of it gets easier, and then like, and even too like when someone's like gets a little confused about what to do, I'm like, well, just grab a d20. That's usually a good
You
good
know what?
inclination of where we're gonna end up.
I got a cave and admit it too. That just makes sense. In the now that we're talking about this, it's like just tell them the score is pretty much irrelevant. It's just the modifier. I mean,
Yeah,
because somebody in the chat said like asking, going over like what the ability scores are. It's like I was thinking about. It, I was like, just yeah. I mean, the score is pretty much moot. Like the put the modifier in the big square.
I always put the
That's what you want
modifier in the big square.
to. I know. I'm kidding. I always have staunchly said the otherwise, but it's like, but yeah, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
It's just not really important.
A lot of other games since D&D has come along have figured that part out.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, this is this arbitrary number that we don't use for anything. And then like they'll find something that they kind of like pigeonhole and figure out a use for it.
Hmm.
Which is like I think strength is the only stat, right, that has another use.
Yeah, pretty, yeah. I mean, unless you're bumping one of them up to make the modifier go up, essentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all I can think of off the top of my head about the ability scores.
Yeah.
One of the time-related things that we did recently was I was just talking to a friend of mine about like campaign ideas because he had never GM'd before, and I was like, well, you can just steal from anything, and I know he likes quantum leaps. I had mentioned like you could just run a game like that, and he
Yeah.
thought it was really cool, so I wrote a post about that. And I was like, that could be a really fun way to travel through the time in your campaign and do all sorts of different things because it's like, well, you'd pretty much just be playing whatever creature your DM handed you who you leapt into that week, which would be really neat. Like, what if
I kind
you
of want
wake
to
up and you're
do.
all like a bunch of like like one of them's a bug, you're all goblinoids, like a bugbear, a hobgoblin, a goblin. It's like, man, we gotta, figure out what
I
we're
want to
supposed
kind
to
of do
do
like
here and
a
fix things.
sliders quantum leap mashup, right? Um, where it's like the mechanic is like quantum leap, but it's a group like sliders.
Yeah, right.
And
Where you just leap and they all do it together. But I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, and you're leaping through different worlds and stuff. I wanted to play a game like that where you're always the same character, but like every time you leap, it's a new game.
yeah,
Or
you could just use creature stat blocks. You
yeah,
wouldn't even have to be like level dependent. I mean, it wouldn't. Your campaign could go all over the place.
I feel like it would be a fun way to explore like a bunch of new systems. If you have at least like have a GM that can run them all, or at
Bunch of
least
new. Oh,
several
you
of
mean
them.
playing different games?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh wow, boy, that would be pretty interesting.
yeah. Obviously, it's
You'd
not
really have to nail like what the point of each particular game was
when you got there. Well,
to
you know
make it
what? Think about it.
like distinct enough and
Like,
worthwhile.
right, like going back to kind of like your thing is like you like it when a game when you open it up and like in the first page kind of says what this game is, what it's for,
Yeah,
what it does, right? Well, like that would be like every adventure, right? It'd be like you're trying to like what
right.
makes you leap is fulfilling that like that one paragraph.
Right. So when you leap into
Yeah,
like the D&D world, it's like you're going to fight a monster, explore a probably ruined place, interact with strange and interesting personalities and
yeah,
and steal their shit.
definitely. I think when you're talking about the face stuff in time
Uh-huh.
during I don't know if I rolled randomly or if I picked a number, but I did that with the Scarlet Sisterhood as well. And like I don't know if I did like 18 months or 24 months. It wasn't like so much that it would really hurt them in the game per se. But I picked it very specific because one of the characters, Deneen, had a child that was a toddler. And 18 months, 24 months is a huge amount of change in a child that young.
Mm-hmm.
And and it made for some really cool like role playing scenes when they got
Yeah,
back. Like the husband had kind of mentally moved on. And we're like, all right, you know what? Danine's gone. She's not coming back. Finally, something
sure.
finally got her. And then, at that point, like the kid is already kind of given up that mommy's coming home, or maybe even they don't even recognize them because so much development happens in that amount of
Mm-hmm.
time for a child. So that stuff is always kind of fun to play with.
Um, it made me think when you were talking about it too, because I was like, well, was she a elf or a half elf?
She was an elf.
Oh, okay. Um, yeah, either way, but yeah, especially for elves, it's like, well, that kind of campaign. I mean, a lot of like that dimension of elves is pretty much lost when players play elves, right? Too, like that
Yeah.
long lifespan, because it's like
So,
how much time passes in a campaign? A couple of years, maybe. So,
but
like, if we imagine playing a game of all elves, and it's like you pick up in like 50 years of, even in the Lord of the Rings, it's like it was 50 years between like Bilbo's party and when Gandalf
yeah.
came back. It wasn't like the next week. It was like
So
an entire generations of humans.
her her husband was either half elf or a quarter elf.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's definitely more impactful. So, so if he was half elf, then the child is, also going to be more half elf and going to age more like a human than an elf. So it's kind of cool when you can do those things and you have things to really make a difference. One of the things that happened in the game that I ran, I guess, our Griffin Gaff game was kind of our home game, was
Mm-hmm.
having an NPC die of old age, like after the NPC had been around for a long time in the game, right?
Yeah.
So there's just different ways you can use time in your games in order to kind of like create these dramatic
Oh, sure.
scenes and tension.
You
Like
know what
they showed
oh,
up
sorry.
to just in time to kind of like say goodbye.
You know what I always what was what is one of my like I don't know if you have them, but just kind of like GM sort of like holy grail sort of campaigns. It's like, yeah, that'd be so hard, but I would love to like play or run something like that. Do you have any things like that? One of mine is involving time. I just thought of it as like I always wanted to have a game where like you know the things they do throughout the campaign end up like causing the time loop that started their adventure in the first place. Does that make sense? Or something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like where it's like a loop like that, but it's like, I mean, that's so many things and variables, and you'd have to be really on your game for the whole campaign.
That
Um,
that kind of stuff is super tough. That's why anything with time travel is crazy because when you start changing and mucking with things, it's like and trying to keep track of it all as the GM. I think that's why so many people do not like those kinds of stories we're trying to tell them.
yeah, because it's like, well, either you are just the world's greatest mastermind, or you just have to some extent ham fist things in to make it make to pull it off, because it's like you'd have no idea. If you're writing a story, of course you're controlling what all the people do, and you're
Yeah, yeah.
it's like you don't know what's going to happen.
But yeah, in D&D, you have no idea what your players are going to
Yeah, so it
do.
would be pretty contrived. So I guess that's actually the tricky part. It's like, yeah, it's ballsy.
Yeah. So that would be your Maximus Opus, huh?
Yeah, it's just one of those things that's like it seems like it'd be cool, but it's like I think I've probably written a post. I mean, we got like 4,000 articles over
Yeah.
there. Sure, there's something about that,
The
but it'd be fun.
your
Um,
the players would screw it up. They always screw it up.
of course. Um, the I think when I suggested the topic of time is when I was thinking about how, like the time length of sessions. That
uh
was sort of like an outside of the game thing, because that was sort of fresh on my mind a couple of weeks ago.
What do
And I'm
you?
sticking with 2 to 3 hours. That just seems sensible, all things considered in this day and age. I mean, not as like, it must, like, if it's any more or less, it's wrong. But it's like, that just seems like the most reasonable. It's about a movie length, right?
For
You know,
me, it's like 2 to 3 in front of a screen. In person is like generally 4 to 6.
I don't know. I feel like if you're gonna like grow in the hobby, I kind of agree with one of our old collaborators. It's just like, I mean,
45
it's like,
minutes. You
hey,
gotta
you
get
want
it
to
down to
see?
45
No,
minutes.
I mean, just like, hey, you want to
Yeah.
play? You want to devote like 4 to 5 hours every week for in ad nauseum for the rest of your life to this game? Oh
That
yeah, and read like 600 pages of rules first. No,
time is the killer of all groups for that reason. You're not wrong. Like
yeah,
when you're an adult and you're figuring out how to spend your time, what you want to do, and you've got a 4 to 6 hour block of time for that's competing with other things. It's not even that you would rather do other things. It's just like your time. You have all these things that compete for your time, whether it's your job, your family, platitude of hobbies, um, whatever. But yeah, like going like okay, like you could like scrape away like 3 or 4 things or one D&D session.
yeah, right.
So
Um, but also something you said years ago, though, came to mind when I was writing that post too. It was when you were doing, I think maybe it wasn't years ago. It was like there was some sort of organization that really like invited you to run some games or something, and you had like it was a huge group, and you had X amount of time, and you're like, that's only like 5 minutes a person or whatever. And I like that kind
yeah.
of stuck in my mind too. And it's like, well, in 3 hours, you have 4 people, and the DM's probably going to talk about half of that time, right? Because like most time players are talking to you or you're talking to them, the GM. So, and 90 minutes divided up amongst 4 people is like what, 15, like 30 minutes, 45 minutes? No,
Yeah, it
like
was
20 minutes or something. It's like, that seems reasonable. It's like they get 20 minutes to talk to to do their cool thing, roll some dice, hopefully, get a nat 20 or whatever, just have a cool moment. And everybody gets that. And then you're good. You did your cool stuff. You rolled some dice. You remembered what went on.
that. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's when we were paid to do some DMing, and they're like they wanted to like how about 8 players? I'm like 8 players in 2 hours. Like what are they going to be able to do?
Yeah. On the flips. Oh, sorry. Did you have more to say about that?
No, no. Get ahead, and then we'll jump back into the chat for questions.
Yeah, there's some good ones coming up there. On the flip side, though, I've been telling a lot of like, or encouraging a lot of like new DMs and GMs, like just if you want to get into it, just run an encounter, right? Like,
Yeah.
and it's not obviously I'm gonna plug out of the box encounters because that's what they are. But honestly, I've used so many of those. Like that could easily be like an hour. And
When
it's
I did
like
that paid thing, I took one scarecrow, two scarecrow, three
yeah.
scarecrow, and um what was the other one I took? What is I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. The bugs in
What's
their
it?
in their head.
Oh,
Sheep.
yeah, where it's the parasite, the passenger.
Yeah, passenger, right? And I
Yeah.
and just like build out a little thing from that, and it was like
Mhm.
so easy.
But also, I feel like a lot of new GMs too, and even long time GMs. I mean, I feel this sometimes too. It's like you feel that compulsion to like be like, oh, I gotta have this like campaign or even like a whole adventure, right? Or a whole dungeon. It's like it can be a lot, and think like, oh, what if they go on? What if they don't go here? What if I get through it too fast and stuff? It's like if you haven't like if you just try to plan out like bullet points of things to engage the characters and just put stuff in front of them. And actually, I'll dovetail into one of the question Chris has next. Any advice for putting timers into encounters and sessions? They run a large game through Discord, and sometimes decision paralysis can drag out and kill pacing. We started doing it in our products too. We just call it something happens. It's like just have bullet points of like, yeah, whenever you need it, it's just something. This thing happens, right? Like it can move the plot along. It can just get them to do. Maybe it's just like an ink egg bursts out of the ground. I mean, shit happens like that in a D&D world, right?
Yeah, I don't know if they mean that or if they mean like in the round kind of. But both are accurate. Like the something happens is a great way to do it. If you're talking more like in combat where it's like it's somebody's turn and you're like, what are you doing? And they're thinking. I as long as you let people know ahead of time, be like, hey, you know what? We've got a large group. Want to keep things moving. You got 30 seconds to tell me what you're doing. If you can't tell me what you're doing, I'm going to the next player and I'll come back to you at the end. Right? We're going to move you to the end of the initiative.
Sure, that's a great idea.
This gives you some time to think about it. And but like the caveat is, if I come back to you at the end after your 30 seconds and you still don't know, then your character decided to do nothing because they couldn't figure out what they wanted to do. Yeah, because you have to think of the whole table, right? And you want to
right, Spellhawks Press. But sorry to cut you off, but I felt compelled to call it out immediately. Encourage the help action. Hell yeah! Sorry, I'm cursing so much now.
Yeah, you don't know what to do. You can do the help action.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's not it's a great thing. Or dodge. I mean, there is stuff you can do. So yeah, that's a good call. Sorry.
And double underscore. Do you think combat consumes the most of the time in a sessions? It can. Like I've definitely played in games where that's all we did for this session was a combat. Because it was large, it was complex, the characters were higher level, many reasons. Like, but then again, like it depends too, right? So the last session of Curse of Strahd for us was like the scenario was we had two sleeping hags in the windmill, and and someone was sneaking around inside, someone was kind of perched on the windmill, and then we had someone else coming up the road. So that's all we did was the windmill, and basically it was kind of a combat encounter the whole time. But it wasn't just like combat. There was other things going on. So it was, I would say it was kind of dynamic, right?
That's a great example of why it's hard to do like horror in D&D especially. But most role-playing games, because people just crave action. Yeah. It's like, tactically and mechanically, it's like, sure, that makes total sense. But at the same time, it's like, your people trapped in a domain of dread, and these are like powerful hags that are like, spies of the, supernatural lord of the land. You're like just rolling up on them like any old monster, and like,
yeah,
they're not scared or anything. Like, what if they have some kind of arcane defense? Like, I know what the hag stag block that they can't do anything. But it's like if you were really there, you'd be like, I don't know what they like. Do they even sleep? Maybe it's a trap.
Well, it's funny though, because like that we like steamrolled that encounter.
Right.
Part of it was like
I did too when I played in that game. It was surprising, and I was like, did I mess up?
But Bobby Lasaga totally killed one of the players. Me. and it was tough. Like literally, like the next session, like the combat continued and had like another player not popped in. Like it was looking really bad for the party as a whole. So,
though, I mean, it's everything's so subjective. I mean, to a double underscore's question, I'm thinking of that session of Moonrises where we fought Upgrade, I believe it was. That was basically the whole session, but it wasn't just like I swing my sword, I hit, I do this much damage. I mean, you encourage us to, and we're all sort of like that same kind of play style where it's like, well, is this around? Do I see this? So like we want to like visualize it and make it cool, right? So
yeah,
and maybe that system lends itself a little more to that because it's not as crunchy.
Use a forklift for a weapon when when the chance arises.
But at the same time, I mean, you get just you guys have used this example many times. I mean, it doesn't have to be fantastical. It's like, are you in a tavern? It's like, just think what's in there: tables, chairs, people, bottles on the bar and stuff. I mean, if you just kind of visualize what's around, you can make it fun. And even if it takes somebody a long time to decide, it's like, well, they might make it a little easier if the play style is more like immersive like that, right? Where it's like, well, make it real. Like, what do you want to do? And then, go from there, not just like what's the best thing to do. It's like what would you do?
Like
I guess it depends on the deadliness of your campaign. Like I say that I guess the caveat is like I'm a wuss DM. You know, like I always think of that game we played with Esper.
yeah.
Because it's like it's just a different style of game. It's like, oh man, I do not play like this. Like I am not checking for traps with my 10-foot pole, and
All of his
preserving our stuff. I'm
NPCs
used to,
double
like,
tap.
yeah, yeah, right. They came back to make sure that I was dead and stuff. So that's just a different kind. I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah. Also like for like, I feel like don't be afraid to have a fast combat. Don't be afraid that the combat ends too soon. Like, because combat can take a long time. Like, I feel like GMs feel cheated if the combat is too fast and too easy. Like, a bunch of thugs came in looking for trouble.
Infinite monsters.
Yeah, a bunch of thugs came in looking for trouble in a tavern, and the Gobelos were performing, and they're doing their juggler routine, and they're like, "Can we be doing this with flaming bottles of alcohol?" I'm like, "Sure," which they instantly weaponized them to then begin hurling Molotov cocktails at these thugs, which definitely probably shortened the lifespan of those thugs and the combat encounter. But like, my players aren't going, "Oh my god, Dave sucks as a DM. That encounter was so easy. We beat them so fast with our flaming." No, they're like, "Oh my god, he let us do the flaming lockdown."
Still talking about it now.
Yeah, like I've definitely played with GMs who've been like, "No, you didn't say that before. Definitely, you can't do that." Yeah. Right.
And to relate it to time too, like I guess maybe it's harder if you're a new GM and stuff, or maybe less so. Is just not to be afraid to there's no reason time has to be this wonky thing that you delve into when you say roll for initiative. The same way that walking to the next town, it's like, sure, you could. If you wanted to be super crunchy, it's like you could do it round by round or whatever, or whatever, just or even just the travel pace and stuff, or you can just say you're there, So to your point, it's the same thing with when you've already beaten the big dude and there's a minion, so it's like you just mop them up. Or in your example, it's like, hey, I just meant for this to be a fun break state, basically, right? Because that's what combat is, whether it's fast or slow. It's just like, yeah, you guys weren't doing anything, so these drunk guys just were being jerks, basically, and it's like, okay, that escalated quickly, but that's what happens in D&D sometimes.
So here's what I was looking for from Chris. Had my issue. My party had 3 possible courses of action from their stronghold, and it took them 30 minutes to decide which way to go. So, things like that don't bother me if they're interacting.
They're talking to each other. Good. Yes, I don't like playing in or running games for people that don't talk to each other. That's not
can be weird.
And I just have regular old DM anxieties. I don't want to be talking that much. Talk to each other. Your characters are in this life and death situations together. Yeah, talk to each other.
Yeah, Taurus really depends on the group. Some parties might spend a lot of time fighting. Others might spend a lot of time doing shopping. So it all depends on what your group enjoys and what they want to do. And sometimes there's no fight at all. So these are all things that happen. What's that? I once convinced the giant that I was going to eat our horses, that I was the god of cuisine and eating horses is bad and will get you sick. So yeah, all of that is accurate. Also though, as the GM too, you need to understand your group and understand what you want from the game as well, because that can also be problematic as well. If as the GM watching them debate for 30 minutes on what course to choose is not fun for you and you don't like that, then you might need to have a conversation there as well, or figure out what you can do, or what ways for you to kind of be involved if you don't like that style of play, because the GM's a player too, and everyone should have fun at the table.
Mm-hmm.
But me as a GM, I love when I can sit back and listen to them plot and plan and do things like to me that's like, oh, okay, I need to get out my pen and take notes now.
Yeah.
Right? What are they saying? Are they going to come up with some kooky idea that or some speculation? I love when players speculate, right? And the best players speculate aloud intentionally.
Yeah. I like to think I do that. I'm gonna, like, when people say don't say that, now it's gonna happen. It's like, yeah, that's why I said it. Like,
yeah. I really don't like it when the players huddle up, right? And they're like,
yeah,
because they don't want you to use their words against them. They don't want you, but honestly, it's not, as a GM, it's not me using your words against you. It's that I'm actually admitting you had a better idea than I did, right? And I want to reward you for that good idea with some kind of payoff.
Yeah. Yeah, whether it's harmful or beneficial to them too, right? I mean, it could be like, like, oh, what if this is going on and this and that, and he's this, powerful villain or whatever. It's like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Yeah. Like he was just some guy on the street, but sure.
Like we used to play with a guy that really would come up with some really outlandish and kooky ideas and the way he thought about things.
Mm-hmm.
And like 3 sessions in, he like guesses Ted's whole plot line. And Ted like confided in me, and he's like, should I switch it? Should I change it? I'm like, no, why would you do that? Like, give it to him. He guessed it. So what? Mm-hmm. You think of the reward that they're going to have when you get to the end, and they get to, they get to be like, I had that aha moment. I was right all along. If anything, I would throw some red herrings in there to try and throw them off. So that maybe you could get them away from that idea. Not because I don't want them to, not because I like necessarily want them to second guess themselves, but because I want them to be like, oh, I was right all along, and come back to it.
I feel like a big part of developing as a GM is thinking like a player, right? Like whether you're prepping for a session or, I guess especially when prepping for a session, right? Like then we kind of, create our products like that too. It's like, I think we spend more time thinking like, yeah, but they could cast Speak with Dead, so like just, anytime like it's a 5th or higher level adventure and there's like a corpse somewhere, like,
never leave the head behind.
Like, it ain't there on accident, let's put it that way, right?
Yeah.
Like it's there because I've done that before in games. Have you ever done that actually with like, how am I going to convey this? It's like, well, I know they can cast Speak with Dead, and if they can't, just put a scroll in the adventure somewhere they can get. And it's I'll just put a corpse there. That's how they found out about their spell jammers.
They find the scroll on the on the corpse, and they're like, "Oh, great! I'm going to save this for later."
I snuck it in a couple sessions earlier in that what wasn't even a Spelljammer game at that point. They just had it on them, and then when they found the ship, the pilot's body was on the helms. They were like, "We got that Speak with Death scroll." I was like, "Boy, you guys, you're clever." Good call. So yeah, if you're looking at a Nerdarchy product and there's a corpse and or Speak with Dead item in there,
it's not an accident.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Premeditated. It's the same thing with lifelike statues. It's like, what's coming.
Oh yeah.
Just lean into it. You're not fooling anybody, GM.
You just have to put gargoyles everywhere, so they just get used to gargoyles, and then you hit them with that.
And then they're afraid of gargoyles.
D&D is so funny that way. It's just like you're just waiting for the suit of armor or the statue
still
to
go
come
for
with.
it though. There's several suits of armor in Death House, and every time I've run it, like and they're like first level at the time, and as animated armor is pretty badass, right?
Early on, yeah,
so it's a tough fight, and then it's like they'll see another one, they're like, "Do you think this one's animated?" No, it wouldn't be every time. Or like, or even if they know. It's like, okay, it comes to life and swings its sword at you.
You should just put something on the players that they're carrying and they don't know. Is this animate suits of armor near them?
Yeah, it's like then when they're like 15th level, they're like, that's why?
That's
You know how
why.
many armors we've fought?
And we'll curse one of them. They don't know they're cursed.
To Taurus's point about, and good on you for starting an RPG group to encourage people to interact. I'll reiterate what I said earlier. Ask people questions about each other
Yeah.
and their characters. That's a great way for them to form bonds too. I do that every time we do our monthly fan games, or basically whenever I do a one shot or start a new campaign. There's always like some period where like they're traveling, like it took you a week to get here, or blah blah blah. And I always ask people like stuff, to make bonds. Just to ask them, what's a rumor you heard about this other person, and it works every time.
Yeah, I mean that stuff's good in session 0 too, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we kind of mentioned
we do one shot. It's just
oh yeah, not in one shot, yeah.
And to tie it into time again, if you're like many DMs and you have that bit of DM anxiety, it's like it puts the time onto the players. It's like, here, you talk. I mean, your time now. You thrust that player agency on them.
I definitely like doing that. Ted likes to use that tool as well, especially like when there's overland travel, and interject a piece into the game.
Knowing like if odd things about each of the characters in your game helps too, like whether just something from their backstory or something maybe they wrote down like as a bond or a weird like tool proficiency or something, that can be engaging too. Like, oh, you have a weaver's tools proficiency, like you notice like something about this tapestry or whatever catches your eye. That could be a cool like entry point.
You know what? So we recently did like some, well, not in the Court of Worms game I'm running.
Uh-huh.
Like all the players kind of had to like face a piece of their past.
Okay.
And then they also got like a little more information that their players wouldn't normally be privy to, other things that were going on at the same time. So it can also be like a fun tool that way. You think of ways,
oh yeah,
like visions and stuff like that. It gives you a way to kind of like peel back the veil and either see things that happened in the past or something that might happen in the future.
The game we're playing right now together, Ted's game, kind of has like time manipulation elements too, with our little asides that we can invoke to sort of like interject, like, well, actually, prior to coming here, this happened and stuff. And I'm excited to compile that stuff for the Patreon rewards. And I think June is when that's on the sked.
Yeah.
But I think that'll be pretty fun. Just to like just his notes and things and little systems for the other teams and that sort of stuff. Like some of the
I'm excited with the Court of Worms games because there's a were rhinoceros iguana creature. I want to have start stalking.
You love like mutant animal type things, don't you? There's a simic hybrid in you.
There might be. Secretly.
You like that kind of stuff, huh?
Like secretly a simic hybrid. Who doesn't?
Do you have gills under your beard?
I might. Well, you know what?
Feet. He's got webbed feet.
People. So it's funny with that game in session 0, it came up where like one of my players comes from a culture where like violence against cows is something they don't like, which led me to the question of, does that also apply to minotaurs? Which led me to the question of, how would I make what would I make for a non-cow minotaur in this strange reptilian world where I'm telling stories?
Yeah, I actually have run into that similar scenario like several times, like in the last couple of years, with like playing characters and like their just diet or whatever comes up in a game. It's like, I don't know, like it does seem weird to be like a meat eater, basically, of things like that. But like, what if a minotaur like steak or a big bird? Like, is that, I always by that same token,
How does Eric Croco or Kenku feel about eggs?
Yeah, here's a fun fact for you. So I always thought it was weird when like a barbecue place will have their mascot as like a pig with like making ribs.
Yeah.
Like it's cooking its own kind. But my girlfriend works in the food journalism. She's senior editor at a food publication. But the more like explicit your mascot and logo are, like the more authentic your ribs are. Does that make sense? So like you'll notice some places just have like a silhouette of a pig's head. It's like, yeah, that's not like a real, ribs. It's not like a hard and fast rule. It's just sort of like a kind of inside joke sort of thing. But I always thought that was funny. I don't remember why I started talking about that.
I don't know. The animal kingdom is strange like that. I guess because they're animals and they don't think about things. But eggs and eggshells, while it may seem contrary at first, cooked eggs can be a popular feeder food that offers many essential nutrients for birds. Crushed eggshells are also an important source of calcium for nesting birds. So, like, it very much feels like cannibalism to us, but to them, they're like, whatever, yum. So, I forget what show we were watching.
Yeah, but they're still beasts. They're not like humanoids. I mean, game terms. So, like, is humanoid on humanoid feasting taboo?
I would think so for the most part. And I mean, in old edition, Knowles used to like prefer, sentient creatures because they like the way they scream.
Yeah, I think they still do.
Yeah. I don't know if that piece of lore stayed in there or not, but yeah.
Taurus said the group is fairly big. They're thinking of having them as small groups before they meet up. Maybe 2 are brothers, 3 of them are servants on the road. Doesn't make much sense if they all know each other. I actually advocate trying to find some way that people do all know each other, because that's an awesome, like, just thing to hook onto for players in a campaign, and the story of the, like, for the DM too. Like, whether you're part of an organization or you're related,
Yeah,
I know you like organizations.
It goes back to, like, well, how about you find a way to make it make sense, right? Or the players do, more specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Instead of like doing these mental gymnastics in order to get everyone together and playing the game. And, like, I've had way too many sessions of that. I don't want to ever do that again.
If they're relatable relationships, then it's going to encourage player like interaction, right? Whether, like I said, whether they're siblings, or even if they just all work at the same place, right? Like, whether that's like a order of Templars or just like, a mildly successful parchment factory.
How many campaigns?
Scranton of your world.
How many campaigns have you been involved in where it's just like, if you take a moment to think about it, you're like, we have no reason for us to be together. Like,
oh yeah,
and it's so like, I feel like if you just start from a place where it makes sense for your characters to be together, and build those reasons in, it just makes for, I find it makes for a better experience in the games where we've done that.
Yeah, it just gets the players to interact with each other, and it's anything that's relatable gets a thumbs up from me.
It also makes for a better session 0. When you're able to do that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise,
that's a great part. That's a great thing to focus on in session 0. To reinforce what you said, is like, you tell me why you're that's why we're here.
Yeah,
they could have a group patron. That's a great thing.
All the best session 0s I've been part of have been like us talking about how we came together, how we met, and it's like the Expanse game, I believe, for the adventure that James was running, he needed us to all start in jail. But like, we all came up with things that just put us in jail before the game even started. And he's like, oh, that's convenient. So,
oh, you mean like he was it was just sort of a generic, like, you're all in jail.
Well, yeah. So like,
you were like, oh yeah, I'm in jail because I did this terrible thing or whatever.
No, it was an Expanse game, right? And the idea is Fred Johnson pulls you out of jail to send you on a mission.
Wow, they must be pretty important.
But no. It's more like expendable, and he needed people to do things.
Still, Fred Johnson. Is it an OPA prison?
Yeah, it's on the belt, right? So, but like we didn't know any of that going in. Like we just like two of us were belters, came up with a backstory, and where we belong to like a more radical faction, and like an event happens where a bunch of bystanders get killed, and we're like, oh, maybe we don't want to do this anymore, but we also got caught and locked up for it. And Ted's character and Steph's characters were brother and sister in the game, and Steph's character was a cheese smuggler,
okay.
and tricked her brother into helping with one of her schemes, and they got caught. And it didn't matter. And he's like, no, not really. I was just giving my sister a ride. Didn't matter. So we all ended up in jail.
Were you all belters?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were all belters in that game. So. But we already had we already kind of had like this backstory where
sure,
two of us were two groups of two that were already connected.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of what we did with Moon Rises too. Yeah, even that. I mean, it's like we were all in the same shared backstory, but at least there's some connections.
Yeah, the more connective tissue you can build, the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and giving players the opportunity to like build that together with you is.
So we're just past the 9:00 hour mark. Today was like the deadline for some RSVPs for my fan game that I'm running at the end of the month. So if you're a patron, tomorrow I'll be sending out an invite to that fan game because I still have some slots that are open, and the first people to respond will be put into that game. So at some point, a patron message will be going out. Those fill up really fast. Usually within
when are you
minutes.
doing it?
I think 2:30 last Sunday, 2:30 Eastern last Sunday of the month.
Oh.
But
man, I'm scrambling up to the day of usually to get enough players than I do.
Well, I sent the email out a week ago, right? So last Monday, and I was like RSVP by this date.
I should start doing that.
And then so we'll see who responds to tomorrow.
But yeah, the Patreon message works very well.
Yeah, it's pretty fast. So with that, until next time, everybody, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.
You're out.